My name is Robert from the World Bank GFDR, and I'll be facilitating a session this week on open data in the understanding risk context. So let's think a little bit. In this context, what do we know about data and information? One, data is really, really important, and we often have to gather it from a lot of different places to bring it all together to make it meaningful. And there's a lot of challenges involved in that. There's ministries that aren't in a government that aren't sharing data with each other. There's private sector and international organizations that are just kind of holding on to data. There's data that is available, but not in a license that really makes it useful. So one of the goals of our session is to talk about how open data practices and open data principles can help start to solve some of these issues. So first off, what data? I think in this context, we're often going to jump immediately to be thinking about hazard, exposure, vulnerability data. And that's absolutely a good place to start. It tells us kind of what are our risks. But there's a lot of other information that's useful that people are starting to open up. Information about what are our investments, who's funding what where, what are our projects, what are our DRM interventions, are they working? So these are some kinds of information that we're going to talk about that's going to help us in this case. So what do we mean by open? Two things. First, legally open. That means I have the legal right to use this information, my own research, my own tools, my own analyses. Two, technically open. That means I can go to somewhere on the web, download the data, get it via an API, pull it into my tools in a relatively seamless way. PDFs, Microsoft Word, that's not open data. And sort of the argument that we're going to be making is that by adopting a culture of openness, a culture of transparency, we will speed innovation in DRM in this sector. We will be able to do projects faster, better, and by being transparent about how we're doing them, we're going to learn a lot more along the way. So what are some of the things that people are starting to do in this space to really, make open data actionable? First is just making commitments. We're seeing a lot of governments through Open Government Partnership and a lot of other initiatives making commitments to open data. Second, this is really important in the DRM space. A lot of the information that we cared about is custodianed by governments. How can we bring governments together, share lessons across about starting government-led open data initiatives? How can we foster better coordination between all of our efforts to build resilience so we can get a really good sense of who is actually doing what where? And this is another really important thing that Trevor was talking about earlier. How do we then take all of this data and make it useful? How do we build simple, extensible, robust open source tools that will make this data actually useful to decisions? And there's a whole session on that. Again, crowdsourcing is another session that we have this week, and that's a really exciting, kind of new and interesting source of open data. And then finally, this is something that Africa is actually really good at, partnering with open source and volunteer technical communities to take a lot of the information that's being released and build simple tools, build simple applications that pull it together and make it relevant to the public in a broader set of communities. And this is a challenge, right? Communicating risk information to the public is something we all struggle with. Yes, you should absolutely come to our session. It's tomorrow at 11 a.m. We've got some really good speakers. We're very, very lucky to have Dr. Derek Clark from the National Mapping Agency here in South Africa. They have a very good open data policy. They're also doing some interesting work on a project called Mapping Africa for Africa, building capacity in national mapping agencies in the region. We have Mr. B.J. Kokil from the African Development Bank talking about the Africa Development Bank's open data initiative, a lot of the really good statistics and indicators that they're going to be releasing in the next couple months. We have Dr. Jacob Obadai from University of the West Indies, who's leading up some really, really interesting work in the Eastern Caribbean, building regional cooperation around open data, both on the technical side and on the policy side. And then finally from Indonesia, we have Pak Dodi Sukmayari, who's going to be talking about some innovations in the national spatial data infrastructure there that are really geared towards increasing the amount of spatial data that's available to the DRM community. So thanks. Again, it's tomorrow, 11 a.m., room 141. See you there.